Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 8-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players. And I cover other sports as well, including NASCAR, which we have a doubleheader this weekend. So if you want to catch me on the live stream, we're going to be going live 1 p.m. Eastern today, and I'll answer all of your questions. And if you want to watch the preview video, I also have that posted as well. We have a doubleheader, like I said, so you're going to be doing everything twice. So there's a lot to look forward to for that. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And when I go live, you guys don't want to miss out when I go live. And if you don't follow me on social media, I'm at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 on IG. And if you want more content over on Patreon, that's always much appreciated. You get access to all the cheat sheets, the notes, the projections, the Discord chat. We got over 300 people. So if you want to check it out, links in the description below. If you're not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So at pitcher, I think there's just really two clear-cut options. I threw Sandoval on here just because I don't want to only have two guys. But for the most part, I think it's just the two-man show at pitcher. You have your clear-cut SP1 and Kershaw. Then you got your clear-cut SP2 and Chris Paddock. And then I threw Sandoval on here just because I thought he was interesting versus the Rangers. But for the most part, it's pretty much going to be Kershaw and Paddock for me. I'm usually good at being able to gauge ownership the night prior and like who I think is going to be the chalk pitchers. Like last night, I was like, Bauer, Kikuchi, probably going to be the chalk pairing. I think it's going to be Kershaw, Paddock here. Just looking at all the pitchers, it just makes too much sense to me. So I'm pretty sure that's what the chalk's going to be, but I like eating that. These are the two pitchers I feel the most comfortable with. But let's start up top. We have Clayton Kershaw. He comes in at 10,500. He made his first start of the season about a week ago, and he looked pretty darn good. He threw 81 pitches, went about 5.5 innings, I believe, 5.1, 5.2 innings. Had 27 fantasy points. I think he struck out 6. He looked pretty darn good. And one thing to note, his fastball was up. He was around 92, 93 miles per hour. And last season, he was around 90 miles per hour. So we saw an uptick in velocity, which is always nice to see from a pitcher. You don't want to see them down in velocity. So when you see an uptick in velocity, like we saw with Kikuchi, that's good. That is good. That's nice to see. And Clayton Kershaw, Vegas loves him, and I love him too. He just makes sense as your SP1. He gets a really soft matchup versus the Giants, who really struggle versus left-handed pitching. They don't strike out a ton, but they just have a really weak overall lineup versus lefties. And like I said, Vegas loves him. He's pitching at home, less than 3 runs against him. Heavy favorite, 73% chance for the win. 6.5 strikeouts. If you're looking at his numbers last season, pretty good. 27% strikeout rate, 6% walk rate, and gets a lot of ground balls. And if you're looking at the matchup versus the Giants, 23% K rate, 83 WRC plus, 296 WOBA, 149 ISO. Pretty good matchup here for Clayton Kershaw. I think he's your clear-cut SP1. Is he expensive? Yes, but I feel like he's going to be needed for cash games because I don't see myself going double mid-range because there's just not a lot I love in the mid-range, and I wouldn't want to play Sandoval in cash. I think he's more suited for tournaments. So Kershaw, he's the guy I'm looking to if I'm spending up, which I more than likely will be spending up for Kershaw. Even though he's not going to throw like 100-plus pitches, I think we're going to see anywhere from 85 to 90, which I still think is fine because I think he'll be efficient. Then Chris Paddock, 7,900. He's looking like your clear-cut SP2. He's been solid to start the season, and in his first start of the year, he scored 22 points versus this same Diamondbacks team, and I think we can see similar results here. And Paddock, he's a young pitcher, and he's got tons of potential, and I like this. I like when I watch him pitch, he looks pretty good, and I think he's got a bright future ahead of him, and Vegas likes him here, 3.56 runs against him, which is the second lowest, only behind Clayton Kershaw. So I got the two best pitchers according to Vegas for the most part, according to runs implied against the pitcher. Sorry, I'm stuttering all over my words there, but Paddock's, he's got good numbers. He's got strikeout upside as well. 27% K rate last season, only a 6% walk rate. Did give up a lot of fly balls and 1.47 home runs per 9 innings, but that's kind of close to Kershaw's numbers in the home run department. But I like Paddock quite a bit here. The Diamondbacks lineup is not trash, but it just hasn't been that great so far this season. I think they're around 3.5 runs per game, which I believe a few nights ago it was around 2. And I know they had that big outing versus McCullers, so that boosted their numbers up a little bit. But overall, they just haven't been the greatest offensive team in the world yet. But I still think Paddock's going to be fine here. I like the price tag. I like the upside. Give me 5 to 7 strikeouts here, 5 to 6 strong innings. Hopefully pick up the win, and he's going to be looking really good as your SP2 at 7,900. Then Patrick Sandoval, 6,900. Look, I much prefer the first two options, but I think Sandoval is fine as a somewhat of a pivot off of Paddock. I know they're not in the same price range, but I guess you could call it a pivot at SP2. But only 4.36 runs against him. I know that's just dark red because it's only comparing it to 3 pitchers, so it's not terrible. 4.5 strikeouts. He is a favorite, 57% chance for the win. And this Rangers team does strike out quite a bit versus lefties. If you're looking at their splits last season, they strike out 26% of the time versus lefties. Obviously, they got some power, but this is mostly just trying to hunt some strikeouts here. Probably going to give up a run or two, maybe 3, but if you can give me some strikeouts, I'll take it. Now, he did not go deep into his last start. I think he only threw around 60 pitches, so that's obviously a concern. And with Paddock, we're going to get close to 100 with him. I think he topped out at 89, so probably going to see anywhere from 90 to 100 pitches for Chris Paddock, so he's much safer, but there's some strikeout upside here. He had a 25% K rate last season, gave a lot of hard contact at 45%, but I think he's okay. He's a fine option. Double-digit walk rate's a little scary, but he's fine. But for the most part, just give me Kershaw and Paddock. Really, Sandoval is just here, so I don't only have 2 pitchers to talk about. So we'll just move on to the bats now. And we'll start off with catcher. We have Mitch Garver, 4,600, going against the lefty, and Danny Duffy. He should be leading off versus the lefty. I know he did last time, so I would assume that's the case again. And when you get a catcher leading off, I'll take that because for the most part, they usually hit near the bottom of the order. Now, sometimes we get guys that hit in the middle, but leading off, I will take that. And he's got great numbers versus lefties. And the Twins do make a solid stack on this slate, implied team total of over 5. And we don't have a lot of teams that are really high up there. Like, in core slates, we'll see Rockies with 7. We'll see some teams with 6, like the Dodgers, some slates. But 5.11 is actually looking like one of the higher totals on this slate, and I definitely like the Twins here. And like I said, great numbers versus lefties, 415 ISO. These are pretty much JD Martinez-like numbers, 320 batting average. You guys get the idea. Danny Duffy's not a terrible pitcher, but he does give up power to righties at 190 ISO. So I think Mitch Garver is a fine option if you're spending up. And if you're spending down, we have Kirk Casale here at 2,800. Just because it's a matchup versus Brett Anderson, who is not a bad pitcher. He's a very high ground ball pitcher, near 70% to lefties, 50% to righties. But he's a very low strikeout pitcher. So we know these guys are going to make some contact. And the Reds got a couple of decent righties we can throw at him. So don't mind Kirk Casale here. He was chalk last night, did absolutely nothing, but 2,800 should be hitting near the middle of the order. He's got some decent splits versus lefties at 157 ISO. He's fine. I don't mind Casale for a punt option. Going down to first base, we have Max Muncy, 5,400. He homered last night. And look, Johnny Cueto is not trash, but we can certainly use some lefties versus him. And the Dodgers just hit right-handed pitching exceptionally well. And it's a loaded lineup, and they got a team total of over 5. So we can certainly look their way. Now, Muncy's not going to be hitting near the top of the order like he used to. But still, he's still homered hitting 6. And this lineup's just loaded. So you take what you can get in that lineup because there's just so many good bats. Jock Peterson, Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, Cody Bellinger, probably Corey Seager. It's loaded. And Muncy hits righties very well. He hits lefties very well. But, if you're on the Dodgers, I'm going to have some interest. Miguel Sano, 5,000. Similar reasons to Garber. He hits lefties very well if you're looking at his splits. 367 ISO versus them last season, a 285 batting average. 34% strikeout rate. That's kind of what you get with Sano. It's all or nothing, but there's a decent chance he could go deep in this game. I do like the Twins righties, and I also have some interest in the lefties too, which I will talk about, but prefer the righties for the most part. So Sano, he's fine, especially if you're stacking up the Twins. Then if you want a cheaper option, which I actually have a couple, we have Rowdy Tellez. He's 3,300 going against the righty and Zach Godley. And Boston's pitching for the most part has just been pretty ugly this season, so I do think we can use some of these Blue Jay bats. Now, there's no Vegas total out for this game, but I'd have to imagine the Blue Jays are going to be a little bit up there. We know the Blue Jays pitching is just not the Blue Jays. The Red Sox pitching has not been great this season. And if we're looking at his splits, he's actually better versus lefties than he is versus righties. But I just like the spot here. And Zach Godley gave up over a 200 ISO to lefties last season, 18% K rate. He's a pretty low strikeout pitcher. So I think Tellez for value is pretty interesting, especially if he's going to be batting cleanup. Then Matt Davidson, 2,500. He actually homered last night. He was 2,400. Now he's 2,500. Like I said with Brett Anderson, he's not like a terrible pitcher, but a very low strikeout rate, and he's certainly someone we could use a couple of cheap righties against just because they're going to put the ball in play. And look, you can get lucky. It misses the first baseman, second baseman, goes past their glove. But we'll take a couple of hits here, maybe hunt a home run or two. So I almost said I don't like Matt Davidson. I like Matt Davidson at this price tag if you're just looking for value. He's also eligible at third base as well. Now, dropping down to the absolute worst position on the slate from what I'm looking at, usually I've got some cheap options, but there wasn't anything I liked. So hopefully something pops up later in the day. But it's pretty much just Muncy or Biggio for me. And it just looks like I'm going to end up just plugging in Biggio at the moment. We'll see if someone cheap pops up for me. But for the most part, I thought it was a pretty ugly position at second base today. But I do like Kevon Biggio. He homered last night. And he's another good spot here versus Zach Godley. He gave up over 200 ISO versus lefties last season. I already showed you that. And Biggio's got great splits versus righties. A 225 ISO, 361 on base percentage, and just pretty solid numbers all around. Did strike out quite a bit and a pretty low batting average, but I think there's a good chance Biggio can have a pretty good game here at 4,700. So preferred option at second base if you're not playing Max Muncy, and maybe there's another value bet that opens up at second. But as of right now, wasn't much I liked. Sorry, I had to pause quick. I don't remember exactly where I left off, but I think we're talking about third baseman. We got a couple of good spend-up options here. I started off with Nolan Arenado, 5,900 going up against the lefty in Seattle. Now, we're not in Coors Field, so it feels a little gross paying this much for Arenado, but if you have the salary, I don't mind it. He's going up against Nick Margevicius. I believe that's how you say his name. I apologize if it's not, but it looks like Margevicius. Could be Margevicius, but either way, I always like Arenado versus lefties. If you're looking at his splits last season, he had a 296 ISO, 144 WRC+, 315 batting average. Obviously, great numbers all around. If you're looking at Margevicius' splits last season, he actually gave up more power to lefties and a lower strikeout rate, so a bit reverse splitsy, but not like his numbers versus righties were any good either. Less than a 20% K rate, 186 ISO, so don't mind Arenado. I don't mind Story either. I also think you can use some lefties in David Dahl and Charlie Blackmon if you want to get crazy, but I don't really love using the Rockies away from Coors Field, but I do want to single out Arenado here as being a pretty good play if you have the money. Anthony Rendon, I'd probably prefer going with Rendon because I have more interest in using Angels bats than I do Rockies bats. So I guess picking between the two, I would go with Anthony Rendon because he's great versus left-handed pitching. If you're looking at his splits last season, pretty similar numbers to Arenado actually. Batting average is pretty much similar. The strikeout rate's pretty similar. The walk rate's similar. The ISO's similar. He's pretty much the same play as Arenado, but I like the Angels more, and he's just a tad bit cheaper. So yes, I like Anthony Rendon on this slate. If you're looking at large numbers last season versus lefties and righties, pretty good versus lefties, but versus righties, 15% K rate, which is the same to lefties, but a little bit more power given up. So I don't mind Rendon there. And the Angels have over a 5 implied team total, making them one of the better stacks on the slate. Eugenio Suarez, 4,200, going against the low strikeout pitcher and Brett Anderson. Gets a lot of ground balls, but I think we can use some of these righties versus Anderson just to try to get a cheap home run here. And Eugenio Suarez, if you're looking at his numbers last season versus lefties, again, kind of similar numbers to the first two guys we talked about. The ISO is pretty similar. The on-base percentage is similar. WRC plus is similar. You know, he strikes out a lot more at 31% compared to the other two guys, but he's also cheaper, 4,200. And again, really good splits versus lefties. So I think Suarez is interesting if you just want to save a little bit of salary from the top end guys. And then if you're going bargain hunting, Travis Shaw, 3,500. Zach Godley, not too scared of him. Boston's pitching has just not been great so far this season. And if you're looking at his splits versus righties, like he was pretty bad last year for looking at his splits versus lefties and righties, but obviously you're going to prefer him versus righties. Going to be hitting at the bottom of the order, but you could get a cheap home run here at 3,500. And then Marwin Gonzalez, 3,200. He went deep last night, and I had him at like 3% owned in cash games. I wasn't like actively trying to play Marwin in cash, but it's just how my lineup ended up working out. I believe I went Bauer, Kikuchi, Casali, Otani, Biggio, Marwin, Polanco, Trout, Bellinger, and Kepler. So he just ended up fitting at the end. But yeah, he went deep, and he's really cheap again, 3,200. We know Josh Donaldson's on the IL, so he's going to continue to start. And he actually hits lefties better than he does righties. And he's got a 300 batting average versus lefties last season compared to 249 versus righties. And he's just cheap, and I like the twin stack quite a bit. He's got better splits versus lefties. So if you're looking for value, I don't mind Marwin at all. He's also eligible at first base as well. Going down to shortstop, wasn't a position I loved, but Bo Bichette here, 4,800, going up against Zach Godley, should be leading off, and I think Toronto makes an interesting stack versus Zach Godley, not a pitcher I am too scared of. If you're looking at his splits, he was better versus lefties this season, but still solid versus righties, a 288 batting average, 245 ISO, 126 WRC+. If you're using him and Biggio, I don't mind that as a little mini pairing versus Zach Godley. David Fletcher, 4,700. He's pretty expensive. He's usually not this expensive, but he's got some good splits versus lefties. He has a very low strikeout rate versus them as well. Only a 5% strikeout rate versus lefties last season. 5%, man. That's That's a 94.6% contact rate versus lefty. That's pretty darn good. And the Angels do make a pretty good stack on this slate. Absolutely hate his price tag. I don't think he's worth it. But if you are stacking the Angels, he's in play, the shortstop, because I do think shortstop's a weak position, so I wouldn't hate plugging him in. Now, Corey Seager, 4,600. I don't know if he's going to play. He removed himself from last night's game. I'm not sure how serious the injury was. I watched it on replay. Didn't look, I don't know. I don't know how bad it's hurting on him. I don't know if it's more precautionary out of him, but if he's in the lineup, I like him. If he's not, obviously I don't, because he's going to get you 0 points. But let's just assume he's in the lineup as of right now. Just complete guesswork here. I think he's a pretty good play at 4,600. He's been pretty good to start the season, like the Dodgers lefties versus Johnny Cueto. And if you're looking at his splits, he's got better splits versus righties compared to lefties. 239 ISO, 290 batting average. You guys get the idea. If he's in the lineup, I do like Corey Seager, but that is certainly up in the air as of right now. Then Jorge Polanco, 4,200, just continues to be pretty cheap. I do have quite a bit in this twin stack tonight. Now, I will say he's a switch hitter, and he's much better versus right-handed pitching than he is versus lefties. But I still think he's playable at 4,200. And we'll get to a righty at some point in the bullpen, so I wouldn't leave him off your stacks. And I like this price tag quite a bit. And shortstop is a pretty weak position in my opinion. Didn't mean to rhyme like that. So I don't mind plugging in Polanco. Should be hitting near the top of the order, 4,200. And he's a high contact hitter for the most part. So I don't mind Polanco at that price tag. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have Mike Trout, 6,000, who just continues to homer pretty much every single day. Now, last night, he had two narratives going on. He had the new baby narrative, and he had the birthday narrative, homered in his first at-bat. Couldn't make it up. So, now, I don't know if we have a narrative tonight. Now, I guess the new baby narrative was a couple of games old, but it's still fresh for him, and he's just been on an absolute tear. And it's Mike Trout. I don't think I really need to talk you guys into Mike Trout. If you have the salary for it, you play Trout just because he's the best player in baseball, and there's never a bad time to play Mike Trout unless he's going up against someone like, Scherzer, Shane Bieber. Even then, he's still playable. But I like Trout. Now, he's better versus righties than compared to lefties. And he's going up against a lefty in this one. If you're looking at his splits versus righties, it's just absolute smash city. Like, these are some of the best numbers you'll see in the league. Probably the best numbers. I don't have the entire stat sheet. But with enough of a sample size, Mike Trout is just the best hitter in baseball versus righties. Now, if you're looking versus lefties, his splits do drop off a bit. But they're still good. 300 ISO. It's pretty good when you have a 300 ISO versus lefties, and it's bad compared to what you are versus righties. 429 on base percentage, 161 WRC plus, a 20% walk rate. If you got the dough, he's an excellent play like the Angel stack on this slate. If you want to save some money for Christian Yelich at 5,200, I believe he homered last night. Then he had the inside of the park home run the night prior, so maybe he's heating up a little bit. But Trevor Bauer just absolutely devoured this lineup. 12 strikeouts versus the Brewers? My goodness. DeSclafani's not a bad pitcher, but he does struggle versus lefties, so I don't mind using some of the lefties in this lineup, specifically Christian Yelich. But I prefer Nelson Cruz, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and Cody Bellinger, but I don't hate Yelich here in tournaments. He's got great splits versus righties. Similar numbers to Mike Trout, very similar numbers to Mike Trout. And if you're looking at DeSclafani, not a bad pitcher, but 218 ISO given up to lefties compared to 151 to righties. Just really tough numbers overall to righties, and does struggle a bit more versus the lefties, so I don't mind Christian Yelich here in a favorable matchup. Then we have Nelson Cruz, who's going to be one of the best plays in the entire slate. He's expensive at 5,100, but anytime he's playing a lefty, he has got to be on our radar. And he got the night off last night, but he actually ended up pitch hitting at the end. Didn't really work out, but he's going to be back in the lineup, I would assume, going up against the lefty and Danny Duffy, and he has amazing numbers versus lefties. 461 ISO, 195 WRC plus, 195 batting average would be awful. 322 batting average, just elite numbers all around. Danny Duffy, he's an average pitcher, but righties can certainly get to him, and Nelson Cruz is one of the best lefty hitters in the entire league. Then Cody Bellinger, 4,900. He just continues to be too cheap. As of right now, I think he only has 5 or 7 points, so he's not doing great, but 4,900 still grades out pretty well here. Johnny Cueto preferred the lefties versus him, and Bellinger's got some of the best numbers in the league versus righties. Him, Yelich, and Trout, they just crush right-handed pitching. 328 ISO, 317 batting average, 16% K rate. He's an elite play. 4,900 doesn't break the bank either. Then Nick Castellanos, 4,500. Similar reasons to Eugenio Suarez, but he's just so good versus lefties. Almost has Nelson Cruz-like numbers. 460 WOBA, 343 ISO, 370 batting average, only a 13% K rate. He's fine. He's going up against a low strikeout pitcher in Brett Anderson. He doesn't have a high strikeout rate versus lefties either, speaking of Castellanos. So ball should be put in play here, and I think there's a decent chance Castellanos could get a donger here. So I like Castellanos at that price tag. Max Kepler 4,500 and Eddie Rosario at 4,300. These are pretty much the same exact plays. Although Max Kepler was pretty good versus lefties last season for being a lefty. 231 ISO, a 14% K rate's pretty good as well, and a 293 batting average. If you're stacking up the Twins, I think Max Kepler is a sneaky add-on just because people are going to skip over him on the lefty-on-lefty matchup. He's also going to be hitting near the bottom of the order, so I think he's fine in the tournament aspect. Eddie Rosario, not quite as good versus lefties as Max Kepler is, but they're pretty much similar plays, and if you want to get different, you could use some of the lefties because they'll see a righty at some point in the bullpen anyway. Then Jock Peterson, 4,200. He's just got great splits versus righties, and I do like the Dodgers lefties here. And if you're looking at the splits, complete trash versus lefties, but versus righties, 319 ISO, 571 slugging, 252 batting average. I prefer the lefties versus Johnny Cueto, and you're getting a good price tag on Jock Peterson, so certainly don't mind him in all formats. And then at the very end, we have a value play in Phillip Ervin at 3,200 go up against Brett Anderson. I don't love picking on Brett Anderson, and Vegas would agree, only 4.2 runs for the Reds, but low strikeout pitcher, and he's got some decent splits versus lefties. Looking at his numbers last season, 350 batting average, 279 ISO, 164 WRC plus. If you're looking for value in the outfield, I don't mind Phillip Ervin. And I think that's going to be pretty much it for the video, guys. Shorter video than usual. I tried to go through this a little bit faster, so hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Follow me on social media. If you want to support me on Patreon, feel free to do so. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be it. Check out NASCAR if you want. We'll be going live at 1 o'clock, and I'll just see you guys in the next video, and enjoy your weekend.